Hello, it's Thursday, May 21st, and we're continuing on talking about writing topics, and today we're talking about verb tense shift. So what's verb tense shift? It's when you bounce from either past or present tense to a different tense within the same sentence or in the same paragraph, frequently and without reason. So why is it a big deal? It's a big deal because, number one, it creates a lot of confusion for the reader. If you are constantly juggling back and forth between past and present tense, it can leave the reader wondering when the thing you're writing about actually occurred, which is definitely something you don't ever want to do, particularly if you are writing with the intent of convincing somebody of something or trying to convey something very important, right? So that's a big deal. Number two, it's also one of those signs of someone who is not a very skilled writer. So if you are someone who is trying to submit writing maybe for an application to a college, you have to do a writing sample, or for a job, it can really stand out, and right or wrong can mark you as being someone who lacks talent in writing. And again, it's a very easy mistake to make. And typically, the reason why this mistake comes up is because a lot of times when people actually start to write, and this is especially true for students in middle school, which is where I generally teach, they have a task and they just start writing. There's very little planning that happens. And when you write, you get kind of a stream of consciousness effect. And because of that, there's a tendency to shift in and out of tense. Now, students will sometimes start off in past tense, particularly if they're writing about something of historical nature. So let's say, for example, in a social studies class, you were writing about Abraham Lincoln and you're trying to write about what he was like as a president. A student might start off talking about Abraham Lincoln was president of the United States during the Civil War. But then the next sentence, they might say something like, he is a very good president. Right? So they're shifting from was to is. That's a tense shift. Was past tense, is present tense. You want to avoid that. And the easiest way to avoid it, at least for what I tell my students, is to try to write everything in past tense, right? Because it makes it a little bit easier. Now, there are some issues with that. Number one, if you are someone who is new to English, you are not a native English speaker, there are some problems with irregular verbs, right? So irregular verbs are those verbs that when you switch them to past tense, you don't just put ed at the end, all right? So I am, I was, right? So there's an example of it. Irregular verbs can become very difficult for non-native English speakers when you try to change verb tenses. So that's one problem. And number two, depending on what you're talking about, past tense might not work, right? So you have to think about what your subject is. But it's very important that when you write, you go back through and check to make sure all of your verb tenses actually agree and make sense. Now, there are two specific cases here that are, again, highly specific, where you have to use a very specific verb tense. And number one is if you are writing in an APA style for a research paper. Now, the great bulk of students don't have to worry about this until they're working on master's level work, right? So that's postgraduate work. Obviously, in a middle school where I teach, that doesn't come up a lot. But there are situations and scenarios where a student might have to do that. For example, in a high school level class, a student taking an AP science class or something along those lines may be requested by a teacher to write in APA style. And as such, they have to make sure everything stays in past tense. Now, what's the other case? Well, if you are writing literary analysis, by MLA standards, you have to put everything in present tense, right? So very specific and different pieces there that don't really apply to too many people, at least at the middle school level. So verb tense shift, it's something you want to look out for. It's something, again, it happens very, very frequently, but it's something that can be picked up on if you read your work over. All right. And again, if you know it's something to look out for, it's something you can fix relatively easily. Right? If you know verb tense shift is something to look out for, as you start to write, think to yourself, make sure my verbs are all in the same tense. And if you continue doing that, you'll be very successful. So that's it for that one. I hope everyone's doing well. Tomorrow is finally Friday, and it's Memorial Day weekend, which is a 3-day weekend, which I don't even know if they mean the same thing with distance learning, but whatever. I plan on making a video for Monday anyway. Tomorrow, I still have some plans for different things. Today was a kind of a difficult day in the morning because I had to go to my classroom and pack it up for the year. And, you know, it was a surreal experience looking at all of the things that I had in there and thinking about, you know, students who I won't see again until, who knows, September maybe. And amongst those things were on my board next to my desk, like crazy drawings that my students have made for me, like some of these things, because, you know, I have I think a healthy obsession with cats, but I had all these great pictures of cats from students, and I couldn't leave them at work. I had to bring them all home because they were pretty awesome in their variety. So, you know, it just made me a little nostalgic, and it made me miss all of those students who used to do those things. And of course, the wonderful sign from one of my former students who gave me that this year. So I hope everyone's well. As always, if you need me to cover something, please let me know. Reach out to me either through email or I guess leave a message, you know, in the comments section. If there's something I can cover for you, I'll be more than happy to do it. Until next time, be good.